Item 5A, transmitting informational communication relative to a report concerning the kind of political signage and messaging allowed to be displayed at public meetings. This is from the April 1st meeting, I guess, when it got passed through, but it was originally requested, as you all may remember, by Councillor George Russell in response to a sign that said, "Vote for change." His objection was primarily that I had pulled papers to be a candidate for office, and his question was, can people who are running for office display political signs? And as I specified in an email to the city solicitor, the clerk, and Morris Bergman, knowing that it might end up in his committee, that is, of course, it would be unconstitutional if they actually limited it based on a specific perspective. There's issues about fundraising, and of course, we might run into the personalities issue of, if I had a sign that said, for example, Councillor Bergman is a poopy head, that might be a reason that the city could not allow it. But as far as I'm concerned, constitutionally speaking, signage is extremely protected. And even though the city solicitor managed to work in words about respecting a historical chamber, if this body's intent is to change the rules of limiting signage based on a petition brought forward at the end of a meeting because of a sign that said "vote for change" based on the position that that person had pulled papers to be a candidate, it is opening itself up to some serious potential First Amendment issues. And I just hope that we don't, as Councilor Bergman has suggested in the past in regards to speaking at these things, set aside the Constitution.
Yeah, Mr. Webb, I'm going to stop you for a moment. You can continue on. I'm going to give you all the time you want. I just want to say two things. And I hope you listen to the rest of the meeting. I'm not sure you will. But I'm going to ask the city solicitor at some point, if you think it's okay to have held the sign up you held, it would be okay for me to hold up "Vote for Morris Bergman" for re-election. That's the first thing I want to mention. Second of all, you mischaracterized multiple occasions that I ever said, "the heck with the Constitution." We had a discussion at this meeting about behavior at the City Council, and I acknowledge that the Constitution, based on a recent Massachusetts Supreme Court case, allows people to act like fools at City Council meetings. And what I said was, putting that aside, why would somebody continue to act that way? And you have mischaracterized it each and every time that I've said, let's do away with the Constitution. Never said that. You can continue to misrepresent what I said, but just like you have the constitutional right to say what you have to say, I have the constitutional right to correct you. Please continue.
Okay, thank you. I thought we were trying to avoid a back and forth. So just to be clear.
Well, if we're trying to avoid back and forth, Mr. Webb, maybe you shouldn't make analogies like poopy head or whatever you said, because I'm not going to sit here like a robot and say nothing.
Okay, thank you so much for your feedback and opinion on this matter. Just to be clear, for anyone who's listening wants to verify what I had said, this is Councilor Bergman was talking to John Kenow in regards to the discussion of swearing at City Council meetings. He did say, setting aside the Constitution, to try to get John to agree with his position because he knows that John doesn't swear. But John refused to set aside the Constitution because that is a ethically problematic statement. And even though John hates swearing, he would not agree because he recognizes that Southborough affirmed the people's constitutional right to be disrespectful in a public meeting. It wasn't just a matter of act like fools. What the issue was, Southborough tried to prevent swearing. Southborough tried to limit speech the same way that this might. So I don't really care whether or not you're allowed to hold one that says Morris Bergman for office. The answer to that is probably the same as whether or not I can hold one that says "vote for change," which is, as the back of my "vote for change" sign says, this is protected by Rule 11. So the real question here is, are you going to try to limit speech by changing the rule that prevents signs? And that is obviously, we'll figure that out in the rest of the meeting. But as far as mischaracterizing it, anyone can go back and look at the reference, look at the public record. That is why this is so great as a public record. I believe the actual quote is setting aside the Constitution, and I am proud and appreciate and respect John for not being willing to bend to your level to set aside the Constitution to justify saying we should not swear in this space, because this is not about whether or not swearing should be allowed. That has been determined by the Constitution. So anyway.
Review. We shouldn't put ourselves in the position to being sued, right, by someone who happens to be upset that day and decides to challenge a rule.
Well, let me just stop you with that.
Sure.
I'm going to give you as much time as you want. Regardless of the constitutionality, which is extremely important, I'm not being dismissive of it. I'm not being dismissive of it at all. I'm just saying, regardless of the constitutionality, Do you think there's ever a justification, even with anger, to swear at a city council with like F-bombs and stuff like that? Is that, in a council, is that something that's okay?
I think that it's
Not
legal.
constitutionally, I'm not asking that.
Yeah, so I would prefer people not cuss each other out in general, but legally speaking, they're allowed.
I understand, that's why I said
And-
constitutionally aside.
But right now, we currently have a situation in the city council in Worcester and in other bodies here where we're not practicing constitutional law by creating a set of rules that prevent people from doing so. People should be allowed to express themselves.